As I've mentioned in my lecture, I think of Buddha as the original doctor. The Four Noble Truths are actually what a doctor goes through when he sees a patient. Makes a diagnosis, then says, this is the disease, these are the causes, this is the prognosis, and this is the treatment or prescription. So the Four Noble Truths: human life contains suffering. The causes of suffering are as follows: not knowing the true nature of reality, identifying with the ego, craving, aversion, the fear of death. The prognosis is pretty good if we follow the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. And enlightenment is the shift in consciousness that goes from personal to transpersonal to universal. To go to a domain of consciousness where we spontaneously experience universal truths, not really as some kind of moral rules and regulations to follow, but as things that spontaneously happen to us as a result of that shift of consciousness. The Eightfold Path includes changing perception, changing the way we think, changing the way we feel, learning how to meditate, going into the silence, understanding how the way we live and earn our living should be nurturing to the ecosystem, learning how to speak in a way that's evolutionary, being mindful of what is happening in the present moment. These are a few of the things that we learn about as we examine each of these principles that constitute the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. Right perspective is actually seeing things from almost an infinite points of view. So right perspective takes us beyond perception into seeing. That's what we call enlightened beings, seers. So I'm seeing a chair, and on the surface value, this is just a chair, and I'm sitting on it. But if I could see it as it really is, I would see it's also a tree, it's also an ecosystem, it's also sunshine and rain and rainbows and clouds and water and earth and the ecosystem of the earth, the history of the universe, the infinite void. The whole universe pretending to be a chair right now. It's like taking a picture and freezing the movement of the universe into this perception. Why bother with right perception? Because what it does is it tells us that there are so many ways of looking at anything. The world is entangled, it's connected, everything is connected to everything else. Everything is synchronistic with everything else. With right perspective, we have understanding, we have insight, we have compassion. We start to see things without having a win-lose orientation. And therefore we are more creative, we are more insightful, we are more inspired. Right perspective is a very important teaching, and the word right might not be the most important way to label it. Right implies a certain way. It's integrated perspective that is holistic, that is nurturing, that does not have a win-lose orientation, that is relational. And every time now, when you look at something, realize that it's connected to everything else. And when you do that, you will spontaneously have intuition, a deeper understanding of interrelatedness, and that deeper interrelatedness experience will give you the experience of compassion and loving kindness. Correct thinking is thinking that allows us to move along the path of evolution in the direction of enlightenment. So in our store consciousness, at the level of our soul, there are two kinds of impulses. One is the impulse for separation, and the other is the impulse for unity. When we put our attention on the seeds in store consciousness that are of separation, that leads to fear, it leads to delusion, it leads to us versus them thinking, and ultimately leads to conflict. On the other hand, when we put our attention on the seeds of unity, then that spontaneously allows the thinking to blossom in such a way that we experience compassion. We experience kindness, loving kindness. We experience happiness at the success of others. We experience tranquility and equanimity, what Buddha calls divine attitudes. Spontaneous right speech happens when we witness our own speaking. So right now, as I'm speaking to you, if I'm also observing my own speaking, which is being mindful of my own speaking, then spontaneously I will choose words that are nurturing, that are such that they create happiness or bliss in the listener, and that do not offend. Words are healing, and words can be also damaging. And they're the magical property of the one who owns them. And so be very careful and mindful of how you speak, and have only one or two ideas in consciousness when you're speaking. That the purpose of speech is to create happiness in the listener. That's all. And then observe your own speaking. Right action, Buddha got that idea from the science of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is a yoga of action, where when we perform an action, we do it with impeccability. We also do it with the underlying assumption that our acts are actually a divine movement of the infinite being. So every act of mine, every thought of mine, every breath of mine, every movement of mine is a divine movement of the infinite consciousness. It comes from there, it goes through me, then it returns from there. So my job is not to worry about the results of the action. I do what needs to be done in the moment without anticipation of a response or without being burdened by memory, and I leave the results to the unknown. It's literally Karma Yoga. Right livelihood is when you make your living in such a way that you actually nurture the ecosystem. The ecosystem is the web of being, it's the web of life. So livelihood that damages the ecosystem, for example, manufacturing cigarettes or working for a tobacco company or drugs or weapons, these are very obvious examples of wrong livelihood, or let's say livelihood that damages the ecosystem. As we move into a wisdom-based culture and economy in the future, then right livelihood will become wisdom-based economies. And wisdom-based economies will be economies that help the ecosystem. So let's say reversal of global warming, the planting of trees, energy-efficient ways of manufacturing, or rather carbon-neutral ways of manufacturing, technologies for conflict resolution, technologies that actually improve the status of people who are living in the developing world or are very poor. When we see our interconnectedness, then right livelihood is that which helps the whole chain of being, not just ourselves. Diligence, or what Buddha also calls right effort, is just paying attention to the daily practice of what we're all talking about. So even though diligence or right effort is one of the Eightfold Path, it just says practice the Eightfold Path and pay attention to the Eightfold Path. Remember that knowledge is theoretical unless you put it to use. Of all the techniques that Buddha talks about, mindfulness is the most important. Mindfulness means being a silent observer of yourself. In recent times, Krishnamurti called this the highest form of intelligence. The highest form of human intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. And when you observe yourself without judging yourself, there is a spontaneous change in your thinking, in your behavior, in your speech, in your emotions, because you've become the silent witness, which is the deepest part of your being. And also, this can be practiced by just observing your breath, or just observing the sensations in your body, which is called Vipassana meditation, is an aspect of mindfulness. So you could say, today I'll be conscious of my breath off and on, not all the time. Or today I'll be conscious of the sensations in my body. Or today I'll be conscious when I eat my food. Or today I'll be conscious of my walking. Or today I'll be conscious of my speech. Anything, pick any one thing and practice mindfulness. The value of practicing mindfulness, I already mentioned, is that it spontaneously changes who you are, because you start to have insight. Mindfulness is the prelude to insight. And that spontaneously changes everything that we call reality. But the other value of this is that it actually gives you another insight, that you're not your thoughts, you're the observer of your thoughts. You're not your emotions, you're the observer of your emotions. You're not your body, you're the observer of your body. And of course, you're not your mind either, because your mind is your thoughts and your emotions. And when you have that insight, then you realize, so who's this observer? And the observer is consciousness. The observer is the ultimate reality. And of course, there are levels from where the observation is occurring. First, there's a personal observer, then you go a little deeper, you find that the personal observer is a product of the collective consciousness, or the collective observer, if you want to call it that. You go a little deeper and you find there's a universal observer. So just by cultivating mindfulness, we spontaneously get deeper and deeper and deeper till we come to that ground of being, which is the ground of all beings. So the ground of being, at the depths of my being, is the ground of all beings, which means that the consciousness behind my thoughts is also the consciousness behind the intelligent activity of the whole universe. Now, when I have that experience, that is really enlightenment. That is nirvana. Because in nirvana, I realize that I am that consciousness that is simultaneously giving rise to the observer and that which is being observed. So, we usually identify ourselves with this person, this ego. But this person is constantly transforming. It's in the domain of impermanence. The ultimate observer that we experience through mindfulness is eternal, it's infinite, it's unbounded, and it gives rise to these transient manifestations which appear as the personal observer and all the objects of observation. So when I experience that, I can be only extremely blissfully ecstatic, because I realize at the depths of my being, I'm creating not only this fellow that I call myself, Deepak or Deepak Chopra, but everything that Deepak is also experiencing. That's freedom, and that's also the loss of fear of death. So of all the things that Buddha teaches, mindfulness is the most important thing. In the original tradition, that's Vipassana. It gives rise to first the observer and then the insight that comes. That, I had a wrong sense of who I was. Meditation is simply allowing the mind to quieten down till it starts to go slowly, first into the field of the abstract and then slowly disappear into the field of silence. And when we are in that field of silence, we are in a field of infinite possibilities. We're also in a field that is connected to everything. It's the field of omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. It's the field where intention becomes very powerful. Intention orchestrates its own fulfillment. When people talk about the law of attraction, that's where it comes from. Intention has infinite organizing power in silence. So having the intention going beyond the secret passages and the dark alleys and the ghost-filled attics of our mind to the field of infinite possibilities. That's what meditation is. People often think of meditation as a way to relax. It's actually a way to be restfully alert. People think of meditation as a way to tune out. It's a way to tune in. People think of meditation as a way to get away from it all. It's in fact a way to get in touch with the all.